So I've been trying to work on a video for the channel, and it's been taking me a month. I wanted it to be ready for Pride Month, and the entire month has gone by, and that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because I have been weirdly angry. I've been distracted by all of these little things, mostly things that I find myself doing. I will laugh at something, and the cadence of my own laugh will remind me of how my father laughs. He passed that on to me, and that will make me think of my father and the fact that he doesn't speak to me, and he hasn't spoken to me since even before it was formally announced that I was disfellowshipped from Jehovah's Witnesses. And I get angry. I get angry when I think about the fact that even when I was in the hospital, in the ICU, he couldn't so much as send a text message because of the shunning policies of this high control group. And I get angry. We just moved. You can see these boxes here in the background. And I've been doing a lot of cleaning and vacuuming, and I will see the pattern that I leave with the vacuum because it's the same way that my mom would vacuum. And I find myself getting angry at my mom and my cat who just jumped in front of the frame during this emotional video. I get mad at my own mother. Weirdly, I feel angrier at her than I do my dad because I feel like emotionally she knows better. I will walk past a picture of my nephew who's only maybe 2 years old, and I will remember that I don't know exactly how old he is, and that the picture that I have is 6 months old at this point, and I wonder what he looks like, and I don't know, and I can't check social media because my sister, who was my best friend, we were always close, never fought, never had an argument growing up, has blocked me on social media because I decided to leave this religion. And I will remember these facts or be reminded of them, and I'll get incredibly angry. And, what do you do with that anger? So it wouldn't be fair to say that I never experienced anger as a Jehovah's Witness. People get angry for all kinds of different reasons. But I think it's safe to say that the anger that I would experience was always caused by some kind of minor incident. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. Somebody says something stupid at work. Mom or dad makes an insensitive remark or something like that. And of course, occasionally I would get angry at the general injustices that I would see in the world, the unrest, the violence, the oppression, the racism, and I would feel anger at those things. But anger is one of those bad emotions where it's kind of only okay if God does it. He's allowed to have a great day of anger, which sounds nice. I have days of anger all the time, and none of them are all that great. And obviously, I was incredibly privileged growing up. I was in a upper middle class family with parents who were wonderful and loving and supportive, and I was white, and I didn't experience the kind of systemic oppression that so many people go through. So in addition to being shielded in that way, when you are a witness, you are trained to suppress these negative emotions. Certain feelings are marked as dangerous or bad or destructive. Certain thoughts are marked that way. This is one of the first things that a high control group does, is teaches you how to teach yourself how to suppress, dismiss, or kind of demonize certain emotions. And now that I don't have that framework, now that I no longer believe in that framework, and that I find the religious upbringing that I had to be upsetting, I also have different experiences with those so-called negative emotions. So I find myself, for the first time in my life, dealing not with instances of anger, but with an overriding sense of anger in my day-to-day life, just kind of boiling under the surface. Not that I'm a ball of violent rage or anything like that. You know, this is me angry right now. It doesn't seem all that different from regular me. I released those recordings of that I did of me in the elders meetings, and I got a lot of comments of people saying like, wow, I don't know how you kept your calm and you didn't get angry at them. And I was like, that was me being angry. That's what it sounds like. When I was a witness, I lived with kind of an undercurrent of dread and fear. That was there even when I didn't think it was there. That was there even when I felt happy and free and hopeful, because a significant part of my ideology, probably the driving force of it, was the imminence of Armageddon. And that is a fearful thing. Every transgression, every minor mistake is something that could potentially mess up your chances of surviving Armageddon. And I no longer have that, although I don't feel awesome about the way things are heading, globally right now. Now I think in the way that I had a constant simmering under the surface fear, I had that same thing with a sense of anger. And that's really weird and new for me. So I kind of wanted to talk about that because a lot of people that I encounter who email me or leave comments or that I am friends with, will talk about this kind of newfound anger that they have after leaving a cult. And what do we do with that anger? I am obviously not a clinician or a psychologist or a professional anything, really. So these are literally just my thoughts. I didn't script this out or anything. This is all just kind of expressing my experiences. Some people think that they're so great for doing these polished videos where they do a bunch of research and scripting and production, but I today am using the platform as God intended, to be a way for a sad, lonely person to speak into a webcam and complain. Quick insert that I am recording at the end, but it definitely should go right here at the beginning. The number one thing you should do as an ex-witness, even if you think that you're just totally awesome and you have no problems and you're over it, therapy. Going to therapy, talking to a psychologist or a counselor. It's just like you're constantly walking around with like shovels built into your shoes as a former cult person. You're just constantly digging up things that you didn't know were there. And in that sentence, I said shovels in your shoes and ex-cult person. So I don't feel great about this disclaimer. But yes, getting actual professional help is definitely way more important than anything else I'm going to talk about in this video. I think it goes without saying that what I'm talking about is in addition to getting professional help. Because I am not a professional. I am just a person blathering on his YouTube channel. So that's the number one most important thing. So why am I angry? Why do we get angry as recovering cult victims? I've never thought or said that phrase before, recovering cult victims, and I don't like it. I'm not going to use it anymore. But yeah, what is the driving force of our anger? The obvious things are the shunning. The fact that our family, our friends, these people who we spent our entire lives with, who gave us life, in the case of our own parents, have put their religious ideology ahead of basic human decency. Differences of religious opinion, that is a normative conflict. This is something that we deal with every day, in order to live our lives. If you work in an environment with other people, inevitably those other people are not all going to share the same values as you, the same political opinions, the same religious opinions, and yet every day you all have to come together and decide, hey, we are going to communicate, we're going to work together, and we're going to get the job done, and we're not going to scream at each other or otherize each other. We're just going to be nice and do our jobs. So these are the kind of disagreements that are normal, that are common in any other context other than being in a cult, where any kind of dissension against the organization is seen as an affront towards God, an unforgivable sin, however you want to put it. And I think a lot of the anger not just comes from the feeling of abandonment, I don't know how to talk, not just the feeling of abandonment that we feel from the people who we love, and not just the sense of disappointment that they've chosen that over us. I think along with that comes the knowledge that we can't communicate with these people at all. We can't explain ourselves to them. We can't really speak the same language anymore. If they even are willing to listen to us, they're not really hearing us. They're just taking in the words and processing them through the filter of, how can I form a rebuttal? How can I put up a wall to protect my faith and give a witness to my interlocutor in this argument in the marketplace of ideas? I'm assuming that all of our family members are like Dave Rubin types. And of course, along those same lines, we're angry at ourselves. How could I possibly have believed these sorts of things? And we feel that when we hear our former beliefs echoed back at us. When we see a JW Broadcasting video, or we have an interaction with one of our witness family members or friends, and they go into witness mode, and maybe it's just little aphorisms that we say or that we used to say as witnesses, or maybe it's entire lines of reasoning, forms of argumentation that we know that we used to sincerely believe, but now we find them upsetting and triggering, if not outright ridiculous. Those things make us incredibly angry. Probably the biggest thing that makes me angry and that makes me feel helpless is I just pulled a allow myself to introduce myself situation. The thing that makes me feel helpless is feeling helpless. Feeling like you can't do anything about it. And this is going to be very cringe, and I apologize for nothing, but in the movie Batman v Superman, Alfred, Bruce Wayne's butler, has this line that he says to Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne's entire thing is that he wants to... And Alfred says this line, which is, this is how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel. And that movie has its issues, but I think about that line a lot. The feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel. And I think when we get kind of inconsolably angry and we lash out or go on rants, it's because of that feeling of powerlessness, that there must be something we can do And yet, no, we can't. Religious oppression and religious crimes, religious oppression has existed from the beginning of time. Religion has been used to suppress people, to shun out groups, and to divide people. On one hand, we'll rush to Reddit and be like, there's got to be something we can do. Can we start a petition? Can we, while in the same breath realizing that witnesses have existed for 150 years now. The same cycles keep repeating themselves, and nothing ever really happens. And that feeling of powerlessness, at least in my case, makes me really angry. This part was definitely not filmed on a different day, but obviously another thing that we all get incredibly angry about, and justifiably so, is lost time. No matter how much time we were in the group, whether you're a teenager watching this or you were in for decades, particularly if you were raised in the religion, a lot of your formative years were not spent figuring out who you are as a person, in making the kind of mistakes that young people get to make. You didn't get to experiment sexually or with drugs, or I can't pretend to know what the cool young people do because I didn't do them, and I'm not doing them now because now I am an uncool elderly person. And to the extent that, a witness got to experience those things, they did so having this horrendous, life-threatening guilt, so guilty that you're certain that you're going to be massacred at Armageddon. And that's a totally natural reason to be angry. I know in my case, one of the things that was a bit of a revelation to me was realizing that I still have a lot of cognitive dissonance. Now, everybody experiences cognitive dissonance. It just means that you are holding two conflicting ideas in your head at once. All of us have these things, and we're probably unaware of them. But when we talk about that term in, the ex-cult community, it's usually referring to the time where we were a believer in whatever religion we were in, and yet we consciously had feelings that conflicted what we knew we were supposed to believe. We believed both things to be true. The most common one probably for Jehovah's Witnesses is that God is all-loving and all-kind. You can be Jehovah's friend. He loves everybody. Also, he's going to destroy billions of people in his great day of anger and, really give it to them, really murder them in a big way. Those are two conflicting ideas. For me, specifically as a witness, the thing that was my biggest source of cognitive dissonance was thinking that Jehovah's Witnesses have the truth and that nothing that we teach is harmful, while also believing that homophobia was incredibly harmful. And we were a homophobic religion. I had to hold both of those ideas in my head at the same time. But I still have that. And I think recognizing that cognitive dissonance has helped me to figure out probably the main source of my anger right now, which is that as a ex-witness, I am perfectly able to understand a witness's position, their thinking, their way of reasoning, because that was my life for almost 30 years. That was all I ever knew. So everything I say to them, everything I say in every video, I'm filtering through 9 layers of what is the witness comeback to this particular thing. And so when I hear my parents use some kind of witness platitude that this disfellowshipping is a loving arrangement, or hearing it from my parents is a bad example because they don't talk to me anymore, but when I hear these things in a broadcast, if I'm listening to a rebuttal video by Lloyd Evans or whatever, I'm able to understand where my witness friends and family are coming from, because I used to think the exact same thing and reason the exact same way. I also have a completely different perspective, and I now find those ideas to be completely reprehensible and insulting and ridiculous. Let's take disfellowshipping as an example. I think it's cruel, inhumane. I think it's disgusting, and I think that it should be illegal if that's possible. Crimes? Can we make it a crime? Let's get a running counter of how many crimes we can register by the end of this video. And so when I hear, people in my family or friends, or even just like, people on these videos saying these things, I get incredibly angry, thinking, how could this incredibly stupid thing, this demonstrably harmful thing, how can they hear this? How can they hear what they're saying and believe it? And because the shunning process is so cruel, I look at my parents and what they're doing and the way they have disowned their only son and refuse to acknowledge his existence, and the way they have painted themselves as the victims in their own choice to obey their religion rather than their own conscience and heart. And I see these things and I think that it is so incredibly cruel, and I can't imagine how a parent could treat their child like that. And yet I'm able to recognize that I did the exact same thing. I had family members that were disfellowshipped, and I took the same stance. I refused to talk to them. I didn't reach out to them and check and see how they were doing. And I did not view myself as cruel during that time. I viewed myself as enduring a trial, the trial being them getting disfellowshipped, and that being a little inconvenient for me emotionally. I think this is summarized really well in a book by Sarah Schulman called Conflict is Not Abuse. People living in unrecovered trauma often behave in very similar ways to the people who traumatized them. Over and over, I have seen traumatized people refuse to hear or engage information that would alter their self-concepts, even in ways that could bring them more happiness and integrity. For the supremacist, which is kind of her word for the one causing the trauma, this refusal comes from a sense of entitlement, that they have an inherent right not to question themselves. Conversely, the unrecovered, traumatized person's refusal is rooted in a panic that their fragile self cannot bear interrogation, that whatever is keeping them together is not flexible. Perhaps because supremacy in some produces trauma in others, they can become mirror images. And of course, many perpetrators were/are victims themselves. So you probably noticed that the description of the traumatizer and the traumatized both apply to witnesses and ex-witnesses, because we used to be the, supremacist in that situation. We used to be the morally superior one who felt like it was our right to shun people, that we were in the right, we had the moral high ground, and everything that we were doing to uphold Jehovah's standards. But now, as ex-witnesses, we are in this traumatized stage, trying to recover, and we're experiencing all of the things that a victim experiences while also having been the abuser. So a lot of this anger comes from this constant contradiction that I used to be this thing that I now hate. So where to direct that anger? Well, first of all, I think it's fair to say that we have a completely negative view of anger and almost every emotion other than happiness as witnesses. Every picture of a witness is a big, beaming, literally cartoonishly in the case of Caleb and Sophia, I guess, smiling witness. It's just big, beaming smiles, be it somebody carrying a microphone during the meeting, somebody conducting a Bible study, or in Paradise Earth, just big, beaming smiles. And anger, frustration, that kind of, it's always like, meh, there's always a picture of somebody equally cartoonishly getting angry, and that's the bad person. That's the person before they became a Jehovah's Witness. But the reality is that anger can be an incredibly positive emotion. I know this because I am an intellectual who has seen the Pixar film Inside Out. Pretty much all social progress that's ever been made, be it the civil rights movement, marriage equality, something we're still fighting for, women's suffrage, we're still fighting in so many ways for all of these things. But the reason why any progress was made in the first place is because oppressed people were angry. They were angry. They knew what was happening was not fair. And so they got up and they marched and they mobilized and they got stuff done. It did not come about as a result of, peaceful, passive, just saying please to people. That's what the history books would like people to believe, but that's not actually how any kind of progress happens. It happens from a place of motivated and justly directed anger. One of the things that is really hard to overcome, I think, as someone recovering from this sort of indoctrination, is the notion that you can have justified anger. Anger is never justified as a witness. Not really. Not for more than 5 minutes while you compose yourself and say a prayer and ask Jehovah to help you get over the situation. But the kind of moral anger that human beings feel when they notice oppression or injustice, that's something that you're supposed to direct towards preaching, because you're told that the kingdom is the only thing that can solve all these problems. So first, I want to talk about where we shouldn't direct our anger, and that is at your average everyday member of Jehovah's Witnesses, your rank and file members. We all get frustrated and rant, but if there's something that I get really irritated with on Reddit and various Facebook groups and even Twitter, it's kind of this attitude of, can you believe how stupid these people are? Forgetting that, in some cases, mere months ago, they believed the same exact thing. So, this notion that, yeah, I used to be one of these people, but, I didn't really believe it. Nobody really believes it. Everybody deep down knows that it's not true. And so we just have to shake them out of it. This attitude, I think, is completely unhealthy and ridiculous, and I think serves as a defense mechanism against people being truly introspective and wanting to distance themselves from having any responsibility. They don't want to admit that it was actually them in this cult, that they actually did believe these things. So in addition to being cruel and incorrect, it's just not directed in the right place. I almost said directed in the right direction, and I keep on forming these redundant sentences. And now I'm angry about that, damn it. It's not such a big deal now during the pandemic for future generations and historians who will be viewing this video in the Library of Congress. There was a pandemic during the time when I filmed this video. I hate cart crashing. I hate when people, apostates, grab a microphone in the middle of a meeting or during the memorial or during a convention and start screaming and shouting about how Jehovah's Witnesses are shielding pedophiles and stuff like that. It comes from a genuine place. It comes from an understandable place. It comes probably from the right place. Deep down inside, you are trying to shake people out of it and help people who were like you. But I think those displays, which inevitably always seem to get posted on YouTube, are more about making yourself feel better than helping other people. And the reality is, you're playing into Watchtower's hand. When you confront a witness at one of their literature carts, or come at them confrontationally in a kingdom hall, or commandeer a meeting and start shouting about stuff, you're playing into the exact stereotype that Watchtower paints. That's exactly the kind of thing that they tell witnesses that apostates are going to do. And I know for me, when I started doing research, the thing that caught me off guard was how nice everybody was, and that it was not a generally bitter, confrontational community of people. That it was just people, like on YouTube, it was just people giving their experiences or speaking reasonably, or on Reddit, for the most part, it was just a helpful community. So direct your anger at people who actually have the ability to make changes. Even elders. Yes, elders are complicit to a degree in Watchtower's harm, because they're the ones who are enacting the disfellowshipping arrangement, but they are also frequently referred to as company men, because that's exactly what they are. Their job is to maintain the status quo. They get letters from Watchtower about what the policy is, and as soon as they get a new letter, that becomes a new policy, and their job is to not question it and to make sure it is enforced. So I think that there's every justifiable reason to be angry at elders, but if you are trying to be an activist, which is a word I don't love, by the way, but if you are trying to enact changes within the organization, I don't think you can direct it at the people who have no ability to change the system and who only exist to maintain the system. I think that your anger and vitriol, which we have, and it can be a powerful tool, I think it has to be directed at the leadership, at the governing body, at even people on a branch level, the helpers. These are the folks that deserve to be challenged, who deserve to be called out, who deserve to have rebuttals formed. Lost track of my sentence structure on that one. Going into a Kingdom Hall or crashing a Zoom meeting, let's say one person starts to have some doubts based on that. Well, how many other people out of the 100 people that were there are just going to have their faith in the organization fortified because they have now seen a stereotypical apostate and, oh my god, it's exactly like the organization says, and they're just going to dig their heels in further. So maybe you half helped one person, but you were a detriment to 100 other people. Yes, I think our efforts and our anger should be focused on the people at the top. What can you reasonably do with that anger? Well, I think it is legitimately valuable and valid to express yourself online. This is just how communication works. We can make fun of Reddit and Twitter and stuff, but it's just how people communicate now. And especially with something like TikTok, which is so popular with young people, this is how ideas spread really quickly. New cults form way more quickly in the internet age because bad ideas can circulate way faster than good ideas can. And we can counteract all of the bad ideas that Watchtower is putting out there by focusing it in the right direction. Another thing is just, I have realized that my frustrations and anger with this group, with, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and its leadership, are part of the more systemic issues of capitalism breeding discontent in society. You didn't think you'd get through a video of mine without me mentioning capitalism, did you? Like, gotcha, fucking idiot. It's capitalism time. The reasons why cults exist in our modern society is not because cult leaders are magic wizard people who are able to dangle a stopwatch in front of somebody's head and make them feel very sleepy. They're able to prey upon the natural discontent that all of us have with our current society. Now, as witnesses, we weren't wrong about the government being ineffective and corrupt. It's true. Our government, I'm speaking as an American here, dadgummit, government doesn't have the best interests of people in mind. It is ineffective. It is constantly stifling itself from making real change in order to maintain the status quo for the rich people at the top. Those are things that are happening. And we were able to see that as witnesses, but we attributed it to Satan ruling mankind. I want to fight for a society where cults cannot thrive. They're never going to go away, because that would mean literal thought control and thought policing. People are going to believe crazy stuff, whether you like it or not. You can't change that. But a society full of fundamentally happier, more fulfilled people, who aren't experiencing constant oppression from their own government, from their own neighbors, from the people who are supposed to be keeping the peace and the order in their community. If people feel happy and content and safe, they will not be drawn to some wackadoo group that offers those things, because they'll already have those things. People seek cults as an alternative to the misery that is their life, or at least the discontentment in their life. So, for me, I've been able to expand my anger beyond Watchtower to the systems that allow cults like Watchtower and Scientology and Latter-day Saints and all these kind of groups to exist in the first place. Cults are like weeds. You pluck one out, another one grows in its place.
Criminals are like weeds, Alfred. Pull one up, another grows in its place.
That's why there's 9,000 cult documentaries you can watch on Netflix. So, if you want to solve the problem, this thing that makes us angry, pulling up the weed isn't going to help. Pulling out some weed might help, if you know what I mean. I don't know what I mean. I haven't smoked any weed yet, because it's illegal where I live, and I'm a coward, okay? The end goal, anyway, I think should be ending systemic oppression in trying to work locally on a small government level and try and just slowly build a better community, and that will eventually widen out, and to try to create a society that is less apologetic towards extreme religion, or just religion in general, to be honest. Another thing is just finding something else to care about. Finding many other things to care about. Forming your entire personality around hating a thing is not good. You have to also stand up, affirm, and love a thing. Hopefully more than one thing, right? For me, obviously, that is in large part politics, but the biggest thing to me is seeing the injustice that we ourselves experienced and that 8 million other people are experiencing in Watchtower, and widening that out to all people. We look back now on Watchtower and we can see the bigotry, the general queer phobia they have, the misogynist attitudes they have. What we see in Watchtower is simply emblematic of society at large. And probably, if you are somebody who is angry about your experience and wants to help other people and help yourself, it's because you are upset that other people are being misled, tricked, and lied to like you were. So, channeling that energy into Watchtower is good. Nothing wrong with it. That's what I do on this channel.
but it's also limited in its ability to make any kind of impact on society and to fulfill yourself as a human being, because this is such a small subset, such a small slice of humanity at large. You know, what are the most harmful things that we see in Watchtower? Probably homophobia, probably transphobia, misogyny, you know, the way it just completely diminishes the role of women and wears them down and teaches them to think that that's okay, to the point where they can't even see their own subjugation. That's what they do with queer people. They make them feel guilty about simply existing. Well, those things are happening everywhere, all over the world. And there's not a lot that we can do to sway the governing body, because, I don't know, you ever tried to call a governing body member? You ever try to write a letter to a governing body member? I don't think there's a lot that's getting to them personally. I think there's a lot of shields in place before they see any critical information about themselves. But can you be an advocate and take that anger that you have for the oppression of people in the organization and expand it to people who are experiencing that oppression everywhere? I think that is the best way to do it. You know, the kind of homophobia that we see in the organization, that's happening everywhere. It's happening with all evangelical religions for the most part. It's happening just on the right in the Republican Party. They're still trying to pass legislation to undo gay marriage. That's a thing that happened this year. They want to overturn a Supreme Court decision. Do you care about women's rights and you're upset at the lack of independence that women have in the organization? Guess what? The right has talked about their desire to overturn Roe v. Wade. They want to overturn a Supreme Court decision that allows for the legality of abortion. So, while you might not be able to raise much of a stink and get anybody to care about Watchtower, these are things that are actively in the public conscience that you can do things about, that you can take action against, and, I don't know, see an actual impact on society. And as society becomes more progressive, especially towards marginalized groups, the more Watchtower is forced to change. I think you see it right now, and stay tuned for that video about the gays, because I am going to do it and it's going to be great. But Watchtower is very aware that their homophobia is no longer marketable, that they're becoming a toxic brand. And I think you see in their very recent literature, like 2021 publications and stuff that they're putting on the website, that they're starting to have to dog whistle. They'll talk about homosexuality without talking about it. And then, like, in more internal stuff, like the broadcasts that are just for witnesses, it feels like they talk about it all the time. It feels like it's the only thing they talk about, because Watchtower's first, second, and 12th gut reaction to any kind of criticism is to dig their heels in even further. And that means that they're very aware of the fact that society is moving past them, that it is considered just plain wrong to be exclusionary towards gay people. And they can't be open about it. If you go on jw.org, there's a section about are Jehovah's Witnesses homophobic? And the answer is no. Surprise, surprise. Because even homophobes don't want to feel, they don't want to be made to feel homophobic. I'm getting into things that I wrote down for that other video. I should stop doing that. The point is, as advocates for human rights have advanced society, cults like Watchtower become more and more irrelevant, or less and less relevant. grammar nerds, sound off in the comments below. I'm sure that'll be the majority of the comments on this video, or the grammar nerds. I don't think I've said anything else that's too controversial that will get people commenting. By the way, if you don't like what I'm saying, comment so many times. I have found that commenting, good or bad, does a lot to impact the viewership of a video. So if you have a lot of mean things to say about me, say them. And post it a couple times. And ideally post about it every day, multiple times a day, so I stay in the algorithm. The more progressive society becomes at large, the less tolerable a religion like Watchtower is. The first thing a normal everyday person is going to do when investigating a new religion is probably Google them. And Watchtower has done a little bit to like dominate the Google algorithm, so like the first like 5 results are always going to be from their website. But a person's really interested, just like a person in the ministry, they're probably going to go to that 6th item, and they're going to start finding out about Jehovah's Witnesses, and beyond just the horrible scandals about, you know, child sexual abuse and all these things, they're going to see that this is just a bigoted religion. They have all of these horrible policies that keep women subjugated, even to the point where they're stuck in abusive marriages because they can't get a scriptural divorce. Oh my God, you know, look at all of these horrific things that they're saying about gay people that they intentionally try and keep off of their website because they're in older publications. You know, I think if we can, as witness activists, like, be activists for humans in general, that is better for more people, and it also forces Watchtower's hand. It forces them to change, or it will force them to dig in their heels and become even more loud and unappealing, which is going to prevent people from joining them. One of the things, this is just me personally, like, the homophobia is a really huge thing. That's the thesis of the video that I'm going to release next, is that, like, as society becomes more and more accepting of queer people, the more you feel like shit as a witness, because there's more visibility of queer people. There's not enough, but there's more of it. You know, you can watch a children's cartoon show and potentially see a gay person or a trans person, and that's not a thing that existed when I was a little kid. It exists as an adult for me. Good sentence. Grammar nerds, sound off in the comments. The fact that it was so easy for me to hear queer voices, to see them represented in media that I liked, and it made it impossible for me to dehumanize people who are unlike myself, right? It made it impossible for me to simply view them as others. And, you know, those of us who watch Lost know that the others are secret. That anger that we have towards the subjugation of people and towards the lost childhoods of people, those are happening outside of the organization too, on a much greater scale. Witnesses are not the only homophobic religion in the world, and even a-religious people can be homophobic and oppressive and not understanding of their non-straight children. This has been me rambling. Did I mention I didn't script this out ahead of time? Oh, a fun thing to do with your anger is, like, find a good hobby. Like, I've really gotten more into drawing again since I've left the Witnesses. Like, it was my passion when I was in, from the time I was a little kid, was drawing, illustration. I was good at it, and I just stopped doing it just because I was busy with theocratic activities, and, you know, people weren't supportive of it. I liked to draw, like, kind of weird, creepy stuff, and I remember my parents saying, like, why can't you just draw, like, nice pictures of paradise? You know, they might hire you at Bethel. And I was like, I don't want to draw cutesy shit that they would, you know, put in Bethel. Although, I was wrong about that, because like Revelation book pictures and stuff are metal. They're crazy, and it would have been cool as hell to get to like paint three-headed tigers or whatever is in the Revelation book. But yeah, you know, a lot of this anger that I feel that I cannot actively channel into, I don't know, political activism or social justice or whatever, I can channel into art, which is a hobby. And what's great about having a hobby is that it is like literally on the tiniest possible scale, a thing you can actionably do, and you can see the progress yourself and know that you did it. You did this thing, whether it's just a drawing or it's like learning a craft, whether it's getting better at a sport or an instrument. Like, channel your anger and rage into that. For some people who are better than me, it's, you know, exercise. It's, I'm going to improve myself. You know, they work out their anger by working out at the gym, and then they look hot and buff, and I get jealous of them, and I block them on Instagram. I guess in summary, there's so many valid reasons that we have to feel angry, and there's a lot of ways that we can channel that anger. But I don't think the way to channel it is by belittling others within our own community. I didn't say that earlier, but don't do that either. Unless they deserve it, and then it's okay. And don't belittle or otherize or, you know, lash out at rank and file witnesses who are victims themselves. Yes, they are part of the problem, and yes, they make us feel like garbage, especially if they're our family or our friends, but they've been just as unduly influenced as we were when we were in the religion. I think you have to direct the anger at people who can do something about it. I think you have to make yourself into somebody who can do something about it if nobody else is doing it, and also find ways to channel that into something fun and that makes you more fulfilled as a person.